Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing soul coming to us from the US. We have Rebecca Renfroe-Borneman on board today. Rebecca is from Lakeland, Florida, and has had a lifetime of amazing experiences with ETs, UFOs, and being aboard spacecraft since her early childhood. She is the author of the book Quantum Windows and Dimensions, a Christian woman's journey of faith and ET contact. She has made presentations to MUFON and other UFO groups and has appeared on Coast to Coast AM. She tells us that her contacts have been predominantly positive and is a strong proponent of the importance of education of ET contact, and that in education we can step forward into a better humanity as we share our experiences in every organization. Very powerful. So thanks, Rebecca, for coming on.
Oh, what a beautiful introduction. You condensed it perfectly, Jan.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that your story will at least resonate with some and might give answers to others. So thanks.
We all hope so. All of us hope that each time we talk.
Yeah. So Rebecca, let's get into your story. I believe you were born at Fort Belvoir, I believe.
That's correct. Right on the post. But we actually don't know where. And yes. Yeah. Although I had to, when I last traveled to Scotland, I had to obtain a new birth certificate. And they called it Station Hospital. So as I describe in my book, my husband took me up there years ago to speak with historians and to walk around and try to find out anything more that we could. And it was either in a house at that time, because there was no hospital at that time in 1951. I'm 72. I don't care about ages. That's just planet numbers. That's all it is. So at that time, there were two places, which was the home and also the Corps of Engineer, right?
Right.
Did I have that right?
Yep.
The building there, which is right next to the chapel on the base.
Yeah, because your dad's military.
He was, yes.
Yeah. Okay. He was North
Lieutenant Colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel. Okay, wow.
In the Army. And they were about to put that upon him, asked him to stay, and we left Alexandria, and he moved to begin his life in architecture here in Florida.
Wow, beautiful. Nice. So at what age did everything start off for you, ET-wise? 7?
There are memories that I have now that I don't discuss in the book. This is a really good question, because a lot of people say science tells us we can't remember anything as babies. We can't remember where we came from. I'm not going to go into all that now, but I am a lot more open to where I came from, to God's massive creation and why we're here and our choices of staying, which exceed and go outside of the boundaries of theology, and particular one I was brought up in, but nothing takes away from my walk in Christ. So that's my pathway. However, all that surrounds us is now up to discussion, and I'm not afraid to talk about it. The earliest actual memory, spiritual memory that I do have was actually in the womb. The other one has to do with when I was little, between 2 or 3, and I talk about that in the book, and I drew a picture of the angel. And it was in my grandmother's home. And so I could see in this room, this old home up in Georgia, entities and demonic figures that looked like tiny dragons, shadow figures, my grandmother, and the angelic form. So I could tell very early, even as a baby, that we have the capacity to see the beyond in this 3D existence. And somehow that was given to me, and I was able to do that since I was little. And then the contact came again when I was 10, in the same household, the old home, which is no longer there anymore. My grandfather was a banker, and both sides of the family were out of Columbus, Georgia. And anyway, with all that surrounding, people can read about that in the book. But that was the earliest experiences. And then the ETs, actually on a continuous basis, Jan, began around, I would say, the age of 7. And there were 2 points I would leave out the bottom window, just open it with the latch, jump out, go to the back. And also it happened in the front with my mother. She would be standing at the door with me. There were two different places, and I believe they were for two different reasons.
Oh, now when did this happen? Did they come take you during the night?
They didn't take me. This was my own choice. I could get up and go.
So did you go
I
through
was,
like a locked door?
nope, nope. To go to the backyard area, which was a huge field, where I described in the book the description of how they created this, and it was space within space. I would go inside with the ET. There was a preparation prior to it, and I would step through what is most commonly seen on the Stargate series, which is that beautiful silver waving line. And the ET would take me through, and we'd be within space in that huge back area of the field and back of my house. And there would be military there, and ETs and crafts and all sorts of things that took place those years, all the way 7 through 12. And then when I would go to the front door, I would just walk there. Mother would meet me, and we'd go to the front door. She was held there, whereas the five figures would come and pick me up. They put me in a very small craft, and we would shoot straight up. And I believe that had to do with timelines. And the backyard had to do with teaching me different things.
Well, so in your backyard, there would be like a portal that you would go through?
There was a preparation that came first. I would stand there and wait. And there was a preparation of a huge ball that would come down above me out of space. And then I would put it next to my body, and then it would start to diminish, whatever. I still do not know to this day what all of that meant. Something about absorption, whatever was preparing my body. And then it went back up into space. The ET came forward, tall, golden, but the tall golden looked very much like a tall gray. Very kind, 4 fingers, would take my hand, its left hand with my right hand, and I was a child, and we would walk through that waving silver space like you see on the Star Trek series. That is accurate. Wow. And then in the front, it was the 5 figures that my mother described. They were as ugly as hell. That was my mama's description as a Southern belle. And then she would wait for me till they brought me home. But this had nothing to do with the angelic encounters. My experience is that they are on a different realm. They're different species. The angels, now this is my analysis based on my early encounters and having grown up with this. It doesn't mean that I am completely right. It doesn't mean I'm wrong. It just means this is my assessment because of my experiences. And Jan, I'm looking at you, whereas I should probably look into there so that the people you're talking to can see it. From my understanding, the ETs require crafts, but they can also appear and disappear. The angelic realm does not. They, as far as I understand, are made and exist in the realm of God's creation. They're a different light form. They have a different energy signature. And the ETs are species that evolved, that were made, and they evolved, and some are good and some are bad, just like on this planet. We have trafficking and cannibalism and drugs, and they have the same. And there are good ones that are battling and helping us, just as the bad ones are battling against us. And they can choose, as far as I can see and what I've observed, they can choose evil or they can choose good. And I do describe that as one of the first stories, Jan, as you remember, because I know you've read, I described that at the loss of my contact in 2004, and how he gave his life for me, and how he knew Jesus. Well, and I never shared any of that with him. He just came into his own knowledge.
Well, you talked about so much.
I guess I did.
Could you describe how it felt going through that silver veil, silver energy with the golden one? Yeah.
That's a great question, because I wish I could. On the Star Trek series and the SG and all those films and Stargate, thank you, that's my husband correcting me. They show you a tunnel. Now, I have experienced going aboard light, which travels like a wild kind of water ride. It is like that. But when I was young, I don't remember. And I think that taking the hand of the ET in the preparation prepared my body and whatever else I could psychologically to go through that. I don't remember, but I do know that you do travel on light forms, that there is a tunnel that does carry you like that. And how all of that scientifically happens and breaks apart the cells and moves and spins, scientists and researchers are better to explain that than me. And I wish I could tell you, and that's a very good question, but I think I was protected from that experience of being afraid by taking the hand of the ET. I wish I could give you more.
Now, as soon as you came to on the other side, what did you see? Who was there?
The military, and there was always a two-star general, and I talk about him in the book. And they would do different sets of experiments. And there are several different stories I do share in the book. Do you remember one in particular you think that your readers or your listeners would
Well, what was the whole purpose of bringing you there?
Oh, a good question. Was to experiment and to see if I was a good person, a good candidate for whatever the military wanted me there for. And I think, and I do give this example in the book, for instance, you were taught how to jump off of heights. You would calculate the math. And since I'm not real good with math, I don't even know how I did that as a kid. But it was calculated, and you would run it in a circular fashion with your hand, and you would set this cushion, and then you would jump, and then you would float down to the ground. And I remember how I could recognize the two-star, because if I was on top of something, all I had to do was look down at his uniform, and I could see the two stars. And he was not happy because I was so excited about anything they would test me on. I got so excited because I was such a tomboy and I loved it. And the ET would smile, and the two-star general didn't like it. So there were other tests that were done, and they would be there to measure and see how strong you were and how you could counter it and how long you could last in that experiment. I think that's a part of it, like being buried underground and or being held up on the laser light and things of that nature. And I do not think that I qualified or they wanted me for any kind of experiment and to be a part of a program, because the two-star was never happy because I was enjoying myself and I wasn't showing what he wanted to see. And the ET would always wind up smiling, but you know, they don't smile just kind of like that. So that's a good question.
But did the ETs want you over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that I could see and experience. And they stayed with me. They're still here.
Now this golden one, I think you call him like a friendly, what's the term?
Yes, the friendly one. That's how they like titles. If they're going to give you their name, they will. They've given me my name, which they didn't give it to me until recently in the last couple of years. And it's Aquina.
Aquia?
Aquina.
Aquia.
Aquina. Aquinah. Aquina.
Now
I had to research and find, so I'll let your listeners look that one up. And it actually related back into the Pleiades, which is a part of my heritage, which is something as a Christian, a little bit off the rails, so to speak. But again, I don't veer away from my faith and what I believe in. I just know that things are a lot more and a lot deeper than what we're told here on our planet about our history and the pyramids and everything that exists. Like, for instance, you were talking earlier about how the medium told you something. Well, in Christianity, we are not supposed to use those words because biblically, mediums were set outside of the realm of the nation of Israel, and mediums were something that you weren't supposed to go to. And I've learned that it's something that, in other words, God wanted us to approach God and come to the wisdom within us and come to the wisdom that we can share with one another. In trying to always go seek help from somewhere else, go to your source. And it's not wrong. It's just that we can't, I grew up, you can't use that word, but you can use the word prophetess. You can use the word seer. But when you're talking to different groups, there's certain things that you can and can't use. And so I've had to kind of come to grips with that. I understand it. As I understand that a lot of people who hear my story in the Christian community believe that all ETs are demons. And there are some scientists who are Christians, because I've spoken to them, and they believe that everything you see in the sky is demonic, and that you should not be talking about this because you're engaging in demonic activity. But that is not what I have encountered. Species that are out there that you run into, you can share the love of God. You can share the life and the love of Christ with them. They can make a decision what they want, what they believe in, and many of them choose the dark side. So, boy, I went off into another side, didn't I, Jan?
It's all important. It's all connected, really. Yeah. I know I've had people on that told me that the ETs have their own Bible.
Ah,
Yeah. So
thank you. I
find it
didn't know
fascinating.
that.
Yeah. Now, just getting back to the golden one, I know you've seen other beings, but how tall was he?
He ranged from anywhere, and so remember, I'm remembering more from childhood, but also when he came in 2004, as he was passing, they are anywhere from 8 to 10 feet. So I never really measured it. He had shrunken so from what they had given him. It was like a shot of cancer.
Oh.
Boy, I wasn't expecting to get teary-eyed on that.
But he was really golden in color?
Yeah, but he had changed when they gave him the shot. He was shriveled up. You know what an elephant looks like that's old and kind of droopy? That's what the skin looked like.
So was there like an agreement between like the human military and that particular group?
Yeah, he had wanted me to come and sit in a meeting with military and ETs to quietly listen and give my assessment on what I heard that I picked up telepathically was real or honest. And because of that, he gave his own life. He gave his life for me. And I tell you, in the military, to give your back, to hold your back for something, he had my six.
Yeah.
That's the expression. I think it is.
Yeah.
Isn't that right, honey?
Yeah.
In the military, my husband.
So, yeah.
That's right.
Ah, geez. And I guess most conversations with him was telepathic. Or yeah.
Not always.
No.
One time. No, it wasn't the golden one. That's like, boy, you're asking questions no one else has asked before. There was one time I had a smaller ET, and it was the size of the small grays, but it was more of a golden color. So there's some of them that were of a golden and not all gray. And he spoke to me, and I said, "Why are you speaking to me in English, in my language?" And this little one said, "Out of respect." That kind of took me back by surprise. That's like someone learning your language and talking to you. That's why I take the time to learn phrases and things when I'm with other people in other nations, to learn and be respectful to them. And that little ET did the same for me. That was, thank you I had never talked about that.
Oh, it's beautiful.
There you go.
I tried to learn Japanese, really, just
now that's kind of hard.
Yeah. I had to quit.
But telepathy is universal, so therefore you don't have to. speak the language.
Were you showing around? Was like you were? Was it really a craft, or was it like an underground base? Where were you taken?
Well, as a child, I was taken through that Stargate amidst all the long Stargate or enclosure. I'm not properly educated or in the know to know how to properly illustrate it. I do the best in my life story, but I was taken to what matched the outside of the backyard. As to the underground bases, I did encounter that, but that was more like a bilocation or a remote view. That was years later, and I do describe that in the book years later. But I have not physically, as far as I know, been taken by someone to an underground base. Those are of different uses in different locations around the United States, and that's a whole separate story that other people who are more qualified to talk about those. They do exist. They are real. Yeah.
Because there was an event that you were shown an engine room, I believe.
Oh, that was 1992, Yan.
Okay, we could get into that later on.
Okay.
Eventually, I think you went to your grandmother's also, and events happened there.
Yes, there's two places, in Florida and in Georgia. These were the two places where I was taken from this 3D existence into another, and that was very different. My grandfather was a banker, and he had a beautiful home. They had a lot of wealth. The other side of the family was just basic middle class, and everybody got along. Everyone loved everyone. Both families did. And in his yard, he owned a lot of property. So in his forest area, I would go out at the right time, and this was during the day. The others in Florida happened at the nighttime. All I was awake always, and so I would run out back and I'd go to the area, and then I would go through a quantum window, an opening. And my husband put that together for me in the book to the best of his ability. We used a shot back from the early that I found in my grandmother's gathering of all of her photos. And then we used that, and then we put something on top of it, and then we used other figures so that we could be as accurate as possible for the reader to see what I saw. And then I would take the hand of the small ET and go through and play with them. It's beautiful where we would play. The energies coming off of all the plants. You can see the frequencies and the beauty and the colors. It was absolutely astounding. And they would learn from me and I would learn from them. But I don't remember all of it. I just remember taking the hand and going through.
How do you know that you have to go outside?
I would just know, because I think when you grow up with an innate ability, whether it's embedded inside of the DNA, and that's another part I'm willing now to say, that I think it's possible that people have been implanted with programs. And I think that it's possible that my mother was one of them with me for some reason. And when you get a shot of something that enables your DNA to grow your abilities, I think that's what was with me since I was born.
So these events would happen to you a lot during your childhood?
Seeing angels and seeing entities and seeing figures and then the ETs, but they're separate to me. They are separate. And I think you gauge it by not only how they look, but also that the artists are actually very correct in what they show you in all of the museums and the pictures and the galleries of angelic beings. They have a beautiful energy signature, and many of them do have wings.
Did they actually speak to you?
Yes, they do. Most of the time, everything is telepathically, but you can audibly hear, and most of it comes into the right side. For me, this is for me now, comes into the right side of the brain and the ear. And don't ask me what that means. I don't know.
Now, okay, let's talk about your 92 event. What happened in 1992?
I had left New York City and my career. which your listeners, I can now tell you that my background was on the professional stage of New York City and around the country, in Broadway and off Broadway and on tours and in different theaters, dinner theaters. That was my life. I studied at the Conservatory of Music in Cincinnati, Ohio. For 6 years, I had my MA and my BA and my MA was in the fine arts. So I taught speech under the professor of speech my last 2 years getting my master's. And then I went on to California and New York City, back and forth, home, New York City, and all of that. And I do document a lot of the stories and incidents and people, and that is recorded there in the book with photos of some of the things I did throughout the years. So that lets your listeners know about the professional background. So when I came,
send him the song.
oh, okay, all right.
I think he's
Dan said he's gonna send you The Universe Is Calling You, which is used by the astronomer Mark D'Antonio. Because that's a part of my work, is to write music. I've been writing since I was 7, and I'm not known or anything, but there are things on YouTube, and you can look it up.
The universe is calling you. The universe is calling me. It speaks both day and night. It's full of dark and light. And I've heard others call from light years away, and they're real and they're here. Space and time are instantly clear. Planets spin, grids in place. We can travel through space. Fields and forms, path and voids. It all seems with one voice. It's
And let's see, you asked me about 92. So I'd come home, and it was 2 years into being home. My father had passed, and I knew to move home. And I was doing laundry. I was walking upstairs in my room, and there was a visual line that was like a triangular line. And I thought, oh, well, I'll step into that. And then it was magnetic in its feel, and it drew me towards the window. I no longer had my laundry. I must have dropped it on the floor, and I was at the window, and I knew to look off to my left, and that started the whole encounter of the craft, recognizing there was a military man who was learning how to ride it, drive it, learn how to work it. And then it began a 2.5 hour encounter of going back and forth. I'm going to withhold a lot of the information, which I do not say in the book as well, for the protection of those that I recognize aboard that craft. And I'm not going to talk about it even now, because I have not gotten their permission, and we've never had the chance to talk about that. So with that said, I met the ET that was driving it and worked it and saw the board that was used. And I could see the military person, and there were tall grays, very tall grays, that stopped me from coming into one of the rooms, and they put their hand out in front of me, and you can feel it. It's like a pressure that comes, and if somebody does that to you and they're angry, you're either thrown back on your head, or you're stopped, or you're lifted up in the air. In this case, the tall gray knew I was not an enemy. I was allowed to walk around, but I was not allowed into the room where he was, or it was, and it stopped me with its hand. So when I turned around, I looked into another room, and there was the military talking with the gray in an open space room with a table and 2 chairs. That was it. And what I picked up was the ET at that time was not quite happy that the military had contacted me in that space of coming over to this area, because they were there to pick up. And the military man made contact with me, as I did with that's what happens with telepathy. If you get onto the frequency, or as my husband says, within the wave band of something that's coming in, people who understand frequencies and science and radio signals and how to send something across the universe, pictures coming from another planet or coming back to Earth, and same thing, how photographs work and how it works across the Earth and our planet. If you are in line with another frequency and you match up, you receive that intel, and you match up with the person who's sending that to you telepathically, and you get on their line. You're like on the line with them. And the ET that was talking to the military man was not happy that he had brought me aboard, but I got to see most everything that was there once I was there. And I was allowed to walk around, and I walked up about 4 inches above like a magnetic floor. And that's a whole separate story unto itself with my uncle, who would show me. I got to see that he did. He didn't always walk 4 inches off the ground, but you could see it when he showed it to you. And he was there visiting. That's a whole separate story. Growing up and how he came to visit and what he did and what he brought. And in '92, you asked specifically, Jan, about the engine room. I call it the engine room. Propulsion system. It's all a combination of things. It is light, sound, frequency, speed, color, the use of energy from the stars. They garner energy from the stars also as they travel. And in standing before this, it looked like an aquarium, and inside of this watery gel were light figures and rock-like figures and dark matter, and everything moved around. So I did assume, I could be wrong, but I assumed that was how things operated. They encased all of that energy inside of this aquarium-like space where these other energy forms resided. And it ran through the ship. So when I was standing next to the see-through figure that was designed for the craft, very much like your hat. Your hat is designed for you. Our clothing is designed according to our size. And when we are traveling in space, you have an astronaut in his spacesuit, and he's going to wear what's designed for him. So this particular ET, the see-through, was designed for this craft. And so his ability with his fingers aboard the gel on this beautiful monitor, he would rub it, and it would send the telepathy through the body, through the gel, and then it would go through the craft. And that was also a part of it. I think that has something to do with how we can hook up a pilot today with the proper equipment as they place it around the head. Here again, I'm better in my book at describing it. I do a better job because I ask for help on how to best describe it.
Oh, that's something. For those that watched the new, like the remake of Battlestar Galactica, one of the main CPUs or like processing units is like a humanoid, like a synthetic humanoid, but he's in a bath loaded with gel.
Huh.
And through that, they're like they've got access to the entire ship. So I'm wondering if that's another form of
Please tell me what episode that's on, so I will go find
yeah,
it.
you see it throughout the entire show. When you see inside of the Cylon vessels, I think they're in a gel.
Yes, and I was once. That was in '97. Yes. And so Gary Sinise, you're bringing up a really good point, Jan. Gary Sinise in the movie Mission to Mars, one of my favorite films, that is extremely accurate. When they show you that sequence and the monitor shows the waves, and when they go into the light form and go aboard that whole section of the face, and then he goes aboard, but he has to be processed through and prepared in that gel, those energy components, that's what it's like. And then he gets into that craft, and I've been aboard one of those that size and how it looks. And when it closes, it just gels together. It's beautiful the way the metal is almost alive and how it just gels together. Kind of like when you heal a wound on the body, and if you go to a good person, a good doctor, they call it Mohs, like Mohs surgery nowadays, if you had it.
Now, getting back to that fluid, now did they immerse you in that type of fluid for space travel?
Yes, it was a preparation. Exactly. You got it right.
I've
But
had
I didn't have to travel in it. They had to prep me in it for 2 nights. And then I was dressed in specific clothes, taken aboard in the light form, and then I was aboard the ship that was designed with my DNA.
so you weren't there like 48 hours. It was just you
It
went
was
there
2 nights.
twice, 2
As
nights.
far as I remember, Jan, it was 2 nights of preparation. Then I went aboard, and then we traveled, and it was beautiful.
I've had people on board well, on my show that described the same thing. They had to be submersed totally in this gel or liquidy thing and for space travel because I don't know that type of ship wasn't designed for human the human
Thank
species.
you. And I think that the reason why they prepared me in the gel is because they tapped me, and our cells, or the mitochondria of our cells, contains the highest energy within the body, as far as I understand the science. If I'm incorrect, I don't mind anybody correcting me. And then that was downloaded as it came out in the tapping, because they were tapping with their fingers alongside of the gel, and that came through it with the energy components into them, downloaded into their brains, and then they worked it into the design of the ship, which was 7 sections. And I found it so interesting because that is how my parents named me, 777. Rebecca Langdon Renfroe, 777. And there were 7 sections of the ship, and the DNA ran through it. And I think I didn't have to travel in the gel. Oh, there was a B flat tone on the side. And it's in the PowerPoint, yeah. Maybe Dan will be able to see that, Jan. And I think that because they prepped me in that, and the ship was designed for me to fly in, so therefore I didn't need the gel. But if I had been in some other craft, I probably would have had to have been encased. You're right.
Fascinating. Let's get back to the pilot. What type of race was he? Because you do describe him as being see-through or transparent.
You're asking the question that I don't know myself. I just believe he was created from something that's of an aquatic nature, because you could see through the body, see that the blood was going upward. And I found a type of fish and I put that in the picture of the book and found the name, and it's there. I won't thumb through to try to identify it. That would take too much time right now. And so that the reader could see it and see what it looked like and have a better understanding of what I saw. And but it started to sweat after I was standing next to it for 10 minutes, and I don't know, I had to leave. So it was designed from something. It was created by someone or something, but it was sentient.
Could you describe how the ship looked like?
Oh, yes, it was the regular, rounded, beautiful top and gorgeous in its design and an opening so you could see who was standing there. There were two small mechanicals by the tall see-through that I could even see from my room before I even went aboard. And underneath, when it was leaving, it was beautiful. That's a part of the speed and the direction and the rotation. Some are going one way and others are going another way with color and sound and tone. They use everything.
Yeah, it is quite impressive when you do
It
see
is.
craft. It's beautiful. When I called in, when I saw both of my UFOs up close, you're just in awe. People ask you, why didn't you like take a photo? It's too beautiful. Just look at it.
Well, I had my laundry with me, Jan. I didn't have my phone. So did you have the same kind of description when you saw the crafts that you saw? Were they similar or were they triangular or?
No, mine was just like a rounded watermelon or egg shaped. It didn't project like energy outwards, but it was orange red, and the contours were well defined. I don't know. That's it, really. So let's get into the 1997 event. I think you went out camping.
1997 was one of those times where, as you had asked before, how do I know? Well, when I'm supposed to go somewhere or do something or meet someone, in Christianity, you use the terms the Holy Spirit, or I had a dream, or I had a vision, or someone called me, or I had a confirmation. I had an intuitive knowing that I was supposed to go to a camp. The second thing, I did have a dream for 4 months, and it was the same dream all the time. And it was the face of a very handsome young man. And I think I'd have to go back, and I don't have my journal in front of me. I think I even had his name. And we're in a room and so forth. And then he comes out of the dark into the light, and I see his face. And it's the same dream over and over and over. So I start looking for this camp. I knew it was supposed to be up north somewhere. And somehow I wound up finding it. I knew it was where I was supposed to go. I checked it out. I looked at it, and I knew that's where it was. I had never been to that state. It was in Maine, I will say that. So I called up and I said, I want to come and be a counselor or a theater instructor. And all the positions were filled. And I said, it doesn't matter. I don't care if you have me sweeping the floor. I'm supposed to be there, please. So they called back and said, we're going to hire you to be the kitchen manager. And we have young people from all around the world who come, and you'll work with them in the kitchen and tell them how to clean and pick up. That's great. So I asked for my own cabin because I don't sleep well unless it's in quiet. And they did. They gave me a beautiful cabin facing the beautiful lake there. It was a very expensive camp, and a lot of celebrities had their children there. And so it's one of those camps where you had to have money to go there because they had everything possible. And there were 2 major divisions for the camp. And all ages could come, but they had one section that took place the first month and a half, and the next month and a half. So it was 3 months up there. We had a whole week of being up there to prepare and learn everything and get acquainted with who you're working with. And then everyone came into work. And so that's the setup. And that's where it happened. And somewhere so it was June, July, and August, and somewhere in July is when this happened. And they gave me a dream sequence of the bed floating through the wall, and I was being prepared by Native Americans, and I was being covered with water. So all of the memories, actually, I knew that something had happened. I knew that I had had an encounter, but I wasn't allowed to retrieve everything. They wanted it to come back after. So the day I was leaving the camp, when I was aboard the bus to leave and go back into New York City, that's when they started to come back. They said, "I'm sorry, we had to wait," and it just trickled back. And that's a part of what needs to take place for us. We cannot handle the amount of information. If we had downloads of information, it's very difficult for our brains to hold it. It's a large amount of information sometimes. And in this case, it was. And I'm still remembering pieces that go on and on. But I had to draw it all, and it came back. There wasn't any problem. And I describe all of that in the book. And it was, if the listener has ever seen Contact with Jodie Foster, the travel and what she saw in the universe, it's that beautiful. I'm not telling you that that's exactly where I was seated and all of that, but I'm saying that what she saw and experienced in that movie is accurate. Coming down, out, and how she comes down to a shoreline and so forth. That's very accurate.
So at that particular place, so like an actual craft came to get you? Is that?
But it's the one they designed with my DNA, and that's why the prep.
Okay.
Using the mitochondria and the cells, downloading it, and designing the craft so that you can travel in it. Just like the glasses that we wear, we have to go in and get them fitted. I mean, that's logic to me, so I don't have a problem with it. I just don't understand all the science and research and the math behind it, but that's okay.
Because you do talk about how it looked inside, and that I believe there was like a what you describe as a cosmos chair melded into the floor.
Yes. It was beautiful. I'm walking around and I'm hearing the B flat tone going on, and I'm looking at the floor design. And when I first went through this, I tried to go through the center towards the red laser-like lines that were there, where the DNA was moving. And I put my arm in, and it didn't decompose; it deatomized. And so years later, when I'm watching the movie, which is also one of my favorites for children as well, called The Last Mimsy. When they have those stones that show all the sparkle, that when they do their thing, and the child puts her head, her face, and her arm through, that's exactly what happened to me. But this is the DNA is going through, and the laser light is conducting it, and it was warm. And so I pulled my hand back, realizing I better not go that way. So I went back around and walked the perimeter up to where I was supposed to. And the chair, when I got to where I was supposed to be, the chair came up out of the floor. It was absolutely beautiful. And then I sat down, and I believe they were monitors, and they go around. They were silver monitors that came around and here and here. And then another small quantum-like window opened within the craft so that I could see outside, and then we took off. It's majestic, just like you see in the Hubble telescopes, and when the astronauts are in their spacecrafts. And I'm sure this is what people experience who are in the programs that are already out there on Mars and the other planets. That's another whole thing that other people can tell you about in the secret space programs and all of those that are out there.
But what was the purpose of that laser beam?
I believe, now here again, I don't know, this is just my theory, that the laser beam was designating these 7 separate areas, but when it came across the center, it somehow, there were 2 sides of it. You know how when you have a sidewalk, all right, or you are landscaping, and sometimes you have an outline of stone on one side, the plant and the ground, and then you have a stone on the other side, and you've outlined it. And that's your perimeter. Well, I think that somehow these laser lines contained the section of the DNA and how it ran through the craft. Somehow they were capable of holding the DNA as it ran through. This is technology that's way beyond what I can even begin to describe, Jan.
Now, the craft came and brought you somewhere, I believe?
It took me to a planet. And then a voice came out of a nebula and said, go down to the planet. And I did. And so that's why I'm saying if the listener has ever seen Contact, when it shows her going down like that to the planet, that's exactly, whether it's just our consciousness or whether we have consciousness and matter going down, I don't know. But it felt like it was matter. It was me being transferred to the planet, because when they show you in the Star Trek series, when you beam up and you beam down, yeah, you do. Somehow they can de-atomize us, and the light form goes in somewhere and then comes back out again. And kind of like when a person who is working with molding a stone, and they are working with clay, you can remold it. Anyway, that's my example. It's the best I can do. And I went down, and there were some stone structures. It was extremely hot. I tried my best to describe what the planet looked like and its color. And then I saw an empty spacesuit. And I believe from other memories that have returned, and I will share this. These are memories now that have returned. So this is not me remembering from a waking hour or something. This is me remembering from memories that have returned. I believe the spacesuit was for me. I put it on. There were two figures that came and picked me up off the planet and took me to a section of space where there are no stars. And I was put up into a timeline tube that sits in space. This sounds really bizarre. And on one side of the circular tube, the timelines are seen. And and there were people ahead of me, and I went to the timeline I was to re-enter, and I re-entered as a child at the door with my mother. That's why I believe that all this had happened because my mother talked to me about this before she passed. So I believe that the timeline was at the front door, and how all of that works and how it's possible is only in God's creation, and how time really exists, which is beyond our comprehension, is known to others who are in this area of expertise. And that the back, Jan, of the house was for me to experience things with the ETs, to see the military there, to see the crafts, and to experience what I did growing up. And that the front experience with my mother was something else. And then going in the backyard at my grandfather's was the other place of contact, where I stepped into that window with the ETs to play in various places.
So you're basically involved with like two big factions?
Yes, different species. Yes. I don't know why. You're going to ask me why? I don't know. I don't know why.
Coming back to when you were taken to that planet, you talk about seeing adobe structures?
Yes.
It's in the PowerPoint.
It's in the PowerPoint, so Dan has that sent to you.
Okay, I'll share that. Now, did you see what type of like humanoid beings or beings were on that planet?
There weren't beings on the planet when I got there, Jan. That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I know there was someone there with me. I'm going to assume it was a spiritual guide that was there with me. I'm going to assume that because it seems that that's been a part of my life. So whoever was assigned to be with me spiritually Because we have angels. It's really true when people tell you, well, you've got a personal angel. Well, if you don't think you do, I'm here to tell you, I believe you do. So just trust it. And I'm not the expert on it, but I do believe with you and for you. If you're out there listening, please trust that God loves you enough to give you a personal angel. Trust it. And I hope you'll see yours. And so I believe that's what was with me. But the two beings that came to take me, okay, this is going to sound really funky. They were in spacesuits and had things on their boots that allowed them to fly. And they picked me up. And that's why I had to put the spacesuit on, so that they could take me. You can't go into space and be off of the planet gravitational setting and all of its atmosphere. Although it was breathable on this planet, it was so hot that it became unbearable. And so I could only breathe there without something on me for a while. That's why I had to put it on. And then, of course, then you can go into space to a certain degree if you're covered and protected. That's why you have your space. That's why the astronauts have their spacesuits on when they go out to work on the outside of the space station. The vacuum. That's logic, isn't it? That's just logic to me. You have to. I mean, we wear things going into the ocean, and we stand. If something's wrong on our planet and we can't breathe, then we put the oxygen mask on. Just like we have to have that happen when you're on a plane, if something happens. And so if you're going into space, whether you're being taken off of the planet by something else or in something, but if you're outside and you're in space itself, you have to have the body protected.
Well, yeah, it makes sense.
Otherwise, boom,
You blow up.
we blow up, right? Or freeze. Or...
I heard the Greys had like different body suits to perform different tasks.
Now these were, those who picked me up, they were humanoid, and it was a male and female. And I've never talked about it. This is the first.
Nice. We jumped ahead. There's a story in 92 that I wrote down. There's an energy form that entered your room 2 weeks after the 92 event that changed your room to another time period.
Like going back, so we're going backwards in years, 1992, yes. Okay, 2 weeks after being aboard the craft that was outside of my house. Oh, and by the way, that was verified years later, taking care of my mother by one of the caregivers for my mother, who happened to be walking around the lake with their family. And as the craft was leaving my house, it was flying over them. So anyway, that was years later. Confirmation is a great thing. So the energy form, it's before I went to sleep. I'm lying in my room, and the room had windows behind the bed. At this time, there were two separate beds, and over my head through the window came an energy form. And you can show that either from the book, or you can show it in the what Dan has sent you. I needed some water. Excuse me. Oh. The energy form was oval in shape and had a very specific design. And it looked like an amoeba. And there were light forms of a yellowish color that were coming out of it, like electrical units. And it was spinning and rotating at a consistent speed, about like this. And as it went around the room, it was changing the room. The curtains I had up changed and got to very lacy, to another time period. Then my dresser disappeared. And then it kept going around the room, and it was creating a line of great light that had another line behind it. And as it went, and so I was thinking if things are disappearing and they're changing and I'm going back somewhere in time, or it's showing me what was there prior to, because the house that at this point that we had moved into is now 100 years old. It was 1924 is when it was constructed. And I figure, okay, if it's taking me back and whether I'm seeing this or it's actually happening, I may not know how to come back. So I better tell it to stop. So I did. And it did. And it just simply went backwards like a movie, went backwards. And everything came back, returned, everything changed. And then it just simply, the changes stopped. Everything came back to where it was in my time period. And then the form left above my head through the window where it had come in. And I left the room, and I didn't go back in there for 14 years. The next day I left. I fell asleep then.
Sorry for making you jump timelines here. I've got so much notes in front of me. You've had like a shapeshifter event, 2004, 2007.
If we can think of shape-shifting like the current animals that we have here on our planet, chameleons can change color and camouflage. There are certain fish in the ocean that can change color, camouflage. We can do that with suits. We can do that with magnetic fields. Think of it that way first. A shapeshifter can also be good or bad. It can be a species. It can be a person. If it's a person, like you and I, of a human nature, with our human DNA, you can have a device. This is what I believe. This is my assessment. You can have a device that can change the space around you or change the way you look. If you are a shapeshifter of another species that has this ability, like a chameleon or some other animal like we have on our planet, think of it that way so it's not so far-fetched, then that species changes. And I had encounters with different ones, and I would really rather not go into depth because each one was different. There were some that were absolutely freakish in nature, deceptive, and very frightening what they could do. What we think we see, even now in some of our politicians, underneath, they are not who you think they are. So we have to look with our spiritual eyes, and we have to look intuitively, and I can't say that you can know right away. I only know that when it happens, if you have an intuitive gift or you have a sense of knowing, you'll see it, or you'll know to back off, or you'll know, oh, that's okay. So I saw some that knew how, so I'll be real brief. I saw some that knew how to place a face on top of face. That's too long to go into, and it was freaky. I'm talking daytime. I'm not talking, I had this in a dream, whatever, none of that stuff. So the other ones were encounters in stores, outside of a store, following, seeing how they changed. They got into a car, would drive by and then they'd be totally different, or they would change in front of me. Now the good one happened. The one that I did actually report on was one that bothered me in the middle of the day in a bank situation, under open underground daylight, you could see. And it came in one form. I could read telepathically what it was about to do. And it was in one form. Came out of a specific country and the way it looked and what it was going to do. And then it somehow was able to take me in the car and swing me around like being on a roll around. And then it had changed by then and was a different figure. And I actually wrote it up and sent it in because I was angry that if a shapeshifter can do that, then it can deceive you in battle. And it can deceive our military. And that made me angry. So, but a good one was I was in a store, and this is fun. I was shopping and I was in the cold section, and there was a lady beside me, and she's already off to my side, and she's reaching in to get something from the coal section. And time stops, and up walks a person, and they're one gender, and they say, I'm a shapeshifter, but I'm a good one, so don't be afraid. They're not going to harm you, and we're not going to let them harm you. And then it changed, or another one came in. I don't know if it changed gender or changed look, but it was able to shape and change so that I could see a male and I could see a female, like someone from the same race. Very, I saw a blonde man and I saw a blonde-haired woman. So whether it was shape-shifting or I was seeing two separate figures, that I don't know, but it was showing me that yes, we can shape-shift, we can change, but you are not to be afraid, and I don't want you afraid, and they're not going to hurt you. And meanwhile, I'm looking at them coming to talk to me, and I'm looking over at the woman, and she's frozen in time. They know how to hold the space in time where you're encapsulated, and things are moving or not moving around you. It's astounding, and so that I want to end with that, because I want to be uplifting, not untruthful, but I'm not here to scare anybody. Is that okay, Jan?
Yeah, but you did have like an encounter with reptilians, I believe.
My father, when I was little, he would, as an architect, engineer, he took me to different places and showed me where he was working on something, or with him to a place. And we went to a place to visit along the ocean. And I do tell this story in my book. And he knew these people and the house they lived in, and it was just fascinating how they had built it. And there was a fair going on not too far down the beach. So Dad takes my hand, and we're walking along the beach that night to go to the fair. And I looked up at my father, and there was a difference between my mother and my father. When my father talked to me or told me something about my life, and in this case about taking me to where he was taking me, he looked like he was mesmerized, Jan. Just mesmerized, walking and holding me and taking me somewhere. Whereas my mother, she was awake, but she was held to the floor, but totally awake, in control, but her feet were held to the floor because it was only me that was supposed to go with them. And she would have come. She would have gone with her to hold her baby, to hold her child. So Dad's walking with me, and we cross the only best way I can describe it is a railroad track, and we enter into a section that has I don't go into all of this, but I will with you. It's dark, compacted ground. It's separated, and off to the distance is the fair, but this section was designated for my father to take me into. And it was like there was a partial wall off, so we could walk through the section over this rail, like a railroad rail, step over it and go into the section where there were a group of tall, very formidable reptilians. And I was placed in the center, and they were discussing if they were going to use me for something or not. And to this day, I am not certain as to what it was. I know that the tall one that was in front of me was, I describe it as he didn't have a very good attitude. But I just stood my ground and I said, I'm not afraid of you. And that was the tomboy in me, I believe. I really do. I said, okay, I'm here, my dad's here, and I'm here. what's this about? And the other ones just kind of were there, and they were okay. But this main one, who was formidable and had a great deal of power, and he was trying to make up his mind as to whether he was going to use me for something. I don't know what. Maybe it was for the future, to be negotiating between something or what, or something small or big, but they didn't do anything to me. Nobody tried to eat me or get in my head and treat me badly. That did not happen, but it doesn't mean that it hasn't. When a reptilian of a huge size like this, that looks like a demonic figure to someone who's never been familiar with seeing them, I understand how they can be called demons. I understand that. And they can choose the spiritual dark side. They can choose to have the dark inside of them, or they can choose the light, which I call the light of Christ, Jesus Christ, my Savior. That's my belief. So this one was not sure what to do, and whatever decision was made was made. And my father took me on to the fair and then took me back, and there were smaller grays outside of the room where I was that night. And I've seen reptilian figures later on in my life when I worked on a ranch, and that's a whole story unto itself. And they are a mixture. The ones that I saw later on in life, they have interbred with humans, and they are not against humanity. It's like having someone on your side, and they are inbred and they're of their own people.
Fascinating. I've had a lot of people on board, well, on my show that have had like positive contact with reptilians. They interbred with them. They've got children, and they seem to be good.
Wow.
So yeah. You talked during one of your presentations. You talked about the shredder. I wrote that down. What is that? Was that a weapon or?
I wish I had a drawing in front of me, but I will give something for the reader to see. The closest thing, as I'm telling this incident, the closest thing to the shredder is, if your listener has watched Star Trek, the movies, I believe it's the first movie. Is that right, Dan? First movie?
First or the second?
First or second.
With the new Kirk, the young
Yeah,
Kirk.
the young new Kirk. Oh, Chris. Oh,
Yeah.
what a good actor. Handsome young man. Well, they show a large Stargate hanging in space, and out of it is coming this enormous ship with all of these spikes in front of it. It is the closest thing that's similar to the shredder. So now you've got that image. If you have that image in mind, okay, or like spiky fingernails coming at you, if you haven't seen the movie, think of it that way. I do not have a date for this. I did write it out completely. I do have it written out in better form. I do not have that in the book, though. I talk about this incident a little bit in the epilogue. I was taken aboard a very small craft, a one-seater, very similar to the one that you see in Mission to Mars when Gary Sinise flies off. They say, there he goes. It's very similar to that. You're seated, and the front closes down, and it melds into one form. And then you can see out the front when the window opens, or it closes for the travel, and then it will open when you get to where you're supposed to go, so that you can see outside or what's in front of you. And you're seated. I guess if you have a small Porsche, but you can lie back in the Porsche, and then somehow some kind of unit was on the right-hand side with the foot. I was in this thing. Maybe they just fly it for you somehow. I can't really explain that, but I'm above the planet. And I really have not ascertained exactly which country I was above, but I know, and I don't put this in there, even in my write-up, but I believe it was above Europe, not the United States. And in the atmosphere, I was taken to where there are two silver crafts, and I can see both of them in front of me. And to your right, my left, the window is open on the craft, and there are about 7, it could have been 9, but I could see 7, because I counted them, grays, small grays, and they're looking at me, and I'm looking at them. And I said, what am I here for? You know, we're talking telepathically, that's how the conversation goes. And tethered to their craft is another small silver craft in the round. And that window is open, and it's huge. And I'm looking at ETs, and it looked like inbreds and whatever they have done to these small little things. They look like children, but I mean, they were small ETs, more like. And whatever had been done to all of these things, they were running around and they were screaming. And so I'm sitting there wondering, what am I looking at? How do I help them? I can't do anything. I'm over here. Why are you showing me this? And it was so disturbing. And you start to cry because you can't do anything. And you're realizing that you're feeling what they're feeling. It's not our children, but it could have been inbreds. I don't know what was done to these figures or how they bred them or where they came from. But they could see how upset I was, so they slowly closed it and closed that off so I couldn't see it anymore. So then this conversation begins. I'm getting to the shredder. Conversation begins with these small grays. And they were explaining that they were sorry for having interfered with humanity, but they were ruled by the reptilians, a group of reptilians, because not all reptilians are bad. And that they had lost their planet. And I said, well, what happened? How is this? How did you get involved with all of this? Well, we're taking these beings, these small things, for energy, trafficking, and eating. So I said, okay, so why would you do something like that? Why are you apologizing to me? Why aren't you going to somebody who's in power, somebody who's in the military, somebody else? You want my forgiveness? I mean, I'm thinking, I can't forgive you. God can forgive you. So, okay, they said that they were ruled, overseers were this particular group of reptilians, and that the reptilians had destroyed their planet. I do not know where that planet is. Somebody else tells you that I said that's not true. I do not know what planet it was. I only know that I said, well, how did they do it? And it's with the shredder. I said, can you show me what that is? So they telepathically gave it to me, and when this thing ended, I drew it. And the shredder just goes right into the planet and just rips the whole thing apart. Just rips it. Goes right into it. And they wanted to apologize. And a part of me understood, and in some way, in some small way, I said, I'm sorry for you. And you, for whatever reason, I'm sure you've got to tell a lot of other people, I'll find a way in my heart to forgive this, but I've got to pray for whatever you're delivering. So if anybody is looking at this and you know how to stop this, come forward and be a whistleblower. People down here on this planet do the same thing about trafficking and about abductions and stealing, and it's against the law. So please do the same. Get strong.
I'm sorry for making you go through this emotionally.
Well, it's probably good for me to do this because I don't talk about it, Jan. It's okay. That's the other side of it. Can we
Yeah.
talk about something positive? The good ETs?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, Greer talks about human trafficking a lot with the yeah. Oh, let's talk about your 2006 trip to Georgia, Tallulah Falls, I believe.
Oh, that was interesting. Wow. That was with Broadway and Jazz. Vicki and I are with a whole new group of wonderful musicians, and we were assigned to Tallulah Falls to be a part of their concert series. So we went up and we were given a beautiful home to stay in at the top of a mountain. And it is my belief that because of what happened that night, that my understanding, I'll just make it really short, I thought I was drawn to the door at night to go outside. And the communication that came to my head, which I believe God was allowing through the ET, was to go back to the room, sleep, do not step outside. And so when I looked out, I could see the ET standing there in a yellow type light. And I talk about this, I do share that in the book. But I believe that the Tennessee crystal that this home was made out of had some kind of quality in it, in the stone, that prevents a pickup. If I had gone outside, they could have picked me up very easily. I'd be out in the open. But because I stayed inside, I really do believe that somehow there's some kind of special quality to the stone of that house. If it's not
rose quartz.
I don't know, the stone crystal, the Tennessee crystal, you can go and research it and look it up.
Rose quartz.
My husband says maybe there's a rose quartz quality in it. If it's not scientifically, if someone says that I am incorrect, then it was through prayer that stopped it. But that was fascinating to me that happened. It was a great time, a great concert. It was a wonderful trip. We go up to northern Georgia all the time because I'm a Scot, and when I go up there, I feel like I'm in Scotland, and it's beautiful, northern Georgia. Where do you like to go, Jan?
Well, last time I actually traveled to, that was like a few years ago, but I went to Lakeland, so that was my first time going down south as all to that neck of the woods, let's say. Beautiful place though.
Oh,
Let's get into like a few last stories before we get into disclosure. You went to you had a sighting in 2017, Indian Rocks Beach.
wow. Okay. That's a biggie, and I am hoping that someday someone will confirm this sighting for me that has to do with what I believe is the secret space program. My husband was with me. We would go over to a particular place at Indian Rocks. I was just there a couple of weeks ago with my sisters. And at this particular time, I couldn't sleep, and I knew to get up. Yeah, and you just kind of know. It's like a pull. It's like somebody pulling you. And you know when you feel something, everybody has this initially. There's not a single person on this planet that doesn't have an intuitive bone. They just need to know how to use it. And so I felt that pull, and so I opened the door. My husband was asleep by then, and we were in the cottage section of where we stayed there on Indian Rocks. It was one of the old houses that was left there on the beach at the time. We knew the owners, and let me cross my leg here. I feel more comfortable. So I opened the door, and there was a bright light at a distance. I describe it all and give the altitude and the angle and everything. And the comm that I got, I say COMM, comm or communication. I use that word a lot. The comm I received was pay attention. And then the bright light that I saw shot out over towards the ocean. So I thought, oh, well, I better go in that direction and take a look and see what I'm supposed to do. I didn't have any shoes on, so I stayed on the pathway outside of the cottage area and just walked along till I looked up and I saw it was a beautiful Orion. It's huge and as big as could be in the sky. And I could see within this time span of how this lasted, you can see you know where something is camouflaged because you can feel it. If you're familiar with, you're shaking your head, so you know what I'm talking about. You know where the craft is, and then when it comes out of camouflage, then you can see it and draw it, then it goes back into camouflage. If something's being camouflaged, whether it's close or at a distance, if a craft crosses in front of another craft, it changes that frequency and you see them for a second. It's just like if someone walks in back of someone. You see them, and then you don't see them, and then they go over to the other side. They're camouflaged for a period. It's really that simple for me, if I understand it that way. So I could see those going in and out of camouflage, those that were camouflaged, and where certain crafts were located. And it was a massive either military exercise or somebody was getting ready to fight with somebody. To this day, I do not know, but I began to hear the communication even in the distance. I could see who was in what craft, who was with what, who was doing what, and I do my best to describe that in the book. And all of a sudden, I hear, "She can hear us," shut down, and then everything went whoop, went right off. Just as if I had earphones in and somebody's talking to me, telling me what to say. It was right there. And I'm out there in my PJs and no shoes on after 12 at night and looking up there and there they are. And so I said, okay, well, I'm not going to hear anymore. But it was traffic everywhere and different ETs and inbreds and different species and military. So they were either training or having a practice, or there was a battle going on somewhere. And so I just turned around and went back in, went to bed. And then I wrote it down and I sent it to a friend of mine who was attending a MUFON conference because it was about the secret space program. I assumed that my friend would be able to get it to somebody and that they would write me back. But they never did. But that's okay. That's all right. I know one day it will be, because that's what seems to happen with my life. The confirmations eventually come. And I do my best to confirm most everything in my book, in my life story. I do the best I can.
All right. Wow. One last story before we finish off the interview.
You're fun.
Thank you. You've had this futuristic experience with scientists in a room dealing with crystals.
Oh boy! Wow, that's another long story. Yeah. Okay. I was around 10. I'm in my little room I grew up in, first house here in Florida, and we had a small closet. And one of those old latches, you know, the metal latches that you open up, is a wooden door, the whole thing. It was very small. And I felt that there was something at the back of my closet. Here again, I felt the pull, but it was a different kind of pull. So I got down on my hands and knees and I traveled, and I see this grid forming, and then this red come up. And so I said, well, I'm just going to walk on through this thing. That's again, whatever you dared me to do, I did it. I did it as a kid, whether playing baseball or riding horses or climbing a tree or whatever it was. I did it. So I went through, and there was a shadow figure. You and I talked about the shadow figures, that somehow they're able to move in and out between spaces and things. You're right, Gan. I'm so glad that you shared so much of your wonderful stories with me. It's just so confirming. And the shadow figure was there, I guess, as a guard, and I was allowed to go in and see. And it was a crystalline room full of these tables, these beautiful hourglass tables with beautiful light forms and crystals coming out of the top. And there were light figures that were running around. I know they had some kind of form, and they were just moving as fast as they could, going to all of these sections of these crystalline light forms that were at these tables. And across from me were some steps going up, and then a huge group of windows, and you could walk up to the windows and walk all the way across. And I assume that I got the feeling that they were scientists and that I was somewhere that I'd never been before. And that's exactly what happened. One of them started to slow down its speed so I could see more of its form. It wasn't in complete form. In other words, the energy signature allowed for me to see a portion of its form, but it was glowing. So that's the energy signature that I'm talking about, that you can differentiate forms and people and figures and spiritual beings. And it said that this is a room for the future, and we are adjusting. And they had a problem, and so we don't have time. We don't have time to talk to you and all of that. I tried to condense that in the book as to what the being was saying to me, and the scientists were there to work time, and it involved crystals, and it involved these different setups, and they moved at great speeds. And I walked up along this walkway that had all of the windows, and I wanted to see outside, and all I had to do was think, and I did. And I said, and it was beautiful. I could form what I wanted to see. There was mist. There was something about trees and something on one side. There was mist along the other. And I'm looking back at this now. This is my assessment, that you could see and you could picture what you wanted, and it was given to you, and you could see what it is that you wanted to see. So I said, I'd like to see mountains and a beautiful scene, and that's what appeared. I said, oh, that's great. Wow. So I stepped back down. I wanted to go back into the section of the room where everyone was, but I was prevented. There was a barrier set up, I believe, because I didn't belong there. And then the shadow figure returned and said, it's time for you to go. And then didn't push me back through. Nothing. No one was ever angry or unkind or anything. I went back through. I got angry afterwards because as a 10-year-old, I wanted to go back and I wanted it explained. I needed to know the purpose of this, but I'm the one who went. I chose to go there. So it'll have to be revealed later. If there's anybody else anywhere who's ever seen something like this, that would be great. Or some other researchers and scientists or beings that are far advanced of this nature, because I'm limited. I have only had a large praying mantis, the tall grays, the small grays, those two robotics, the see-through, and the goldens. So I don't know all the number of species that are out there in God's great universe. I don't know all the planets and everything. I'm only limited in my own life story.
And it's an amazing one so far. Wow. Now let's get into disclosure and the importance of, yeah. So
I'm going to bring this book out here. Each one of us can be a part of disclosure, and Yan is giving me this opportunity now. And this is the important part, no matter what or where you are in your hometown. What I've done is I've gone before the mayor, the emergency manager, my local congressman, the liaisons, and I've sat down and they listen. And I leave my book, which is right here. I leave my book. I take in a handbook of material that will take them to places where they can get caught up and have education quickly, such as Colonel Carl Nell speaking at SALT on an incredible 20-minute section of video about exposure from other people. You can watch Richard Dolan on Gaia, and he carries you through like 9 episodes of half-hour each, taking you from the 40s all the way up. You can go to coast. You can go to all sorts of places. You can report at MUFON. you can go and talk to people who will listen to you and take them and prepare the books, a list of books. If you have your book and you've written your story, take your book in, ask to be heard, and take in the 1992 Firefighter's Manual. Chapter 12 or 13 is the chapter on UFOs and what people are supposed to do. Then not the firefighters, but the police department now, which is now official, they now have a handbook out on the UAP handbook across the United States. In the major cities, the Chiefs Association have now compiled theirs. And the reason why we need to start moving on the local level is so that we inform people not to be afraid. We have good and bad people, we have good and bad agendas, and we have good and bad ETs. And until the military and the government and the insiders come forward to help the public delineate who's good and who's bad, all people are going to know is, be feared, they're going to come eat your toes and bite your nose and take you off to another planet. Well, some of them will, but some of them are there to help humanity, like Valiant Thor, for one. So my contingency plan is what I wrote up, and I address it to the mayor, and then I have a chart, a suggested flow chart, and the flow chart starts with the mayor, the city planner, and goes down through everything that you need to do for your city and who needs to be where and what to do. And then you refer them to where they can go and what educational systems and who can work. Like, for instance, if you meet somebody, whether they're in the city commission or whether they're a friend and they're a history buff, send them to the books of Jim Mars. He takes you through history and all that took place within the military, or to Don Sherman's story, Above Black. And then refer them to the good movies or the good videos, such as The Hidden Hand, which will be condensed for you. And there are all sorts of things on video right now, but a lot of them are very long and lengthy, and they don't differentiate, or they'll try to scare you. So then I recommend some, like, for instance, you've got all sorts of books and people. What happened with our disclosure recently in 23, in my opinion, and those who called me after they watched it in the congressional hearings, was that the public was left with fear. It is a national security. And are they a threat? Yes. Are they bad? Yes. Are they this? And it's what we were left with. Question after question was answered with a negative. There was nothing less for the public in that congressional hearing that here's where you can go. Please don't be afraid, public. I'm not saying that any of the men who were there reporting to the congressional hearing were bad, but they didn't leave the public with the positive on where to go and what to do. So it's up to us. Just like when you go to vote, it's up to us. Be informed. Be informed. Know what your Constitution is. Know what to do. And it's the same thing with the ETs. And so don't be afraid. Get your material together and go sit and leave them something and let them know. So when someone actually calls into the city, my husband and I have received calls, and they'll say, well, we were told to call you up. Fill us in. We don't know where to go. Tell me about the ETs. And that's what we do. So just be honest. And if they turn you down, then try to find where someone will sit with you and listen. But don't be silent anymore. And don't be afraid. They're not all good and they're not all bad. But it is difficult to know, and so you're going to side with certain people. I understand that. You're going to side with those who say everything's bad, and others are going to side with, oh, you have to believe they're all good or I wasn't going to talk to you. So find the middle ground. That's the better way to go. Find a unity where you can talk and share, and look towards those who work in these projects, who know what the padookie they're talking about. That's my word, so I won't say anything bad. I can get silly. And so that's my take on disclosure. And if you have a story, be like me and find a good person like Jan. And this is about my 5th interview since I stopped talking years ago. But doing the book has been helpful, and you have certainly been.
He's number 6.
My husband says you're number 6. You're a love. You're a love, Jan.
Oh.
My husband's checking it off. Oh.
Well, I appreciate your involvement within the community and all the work that you've been doing. I wish I had the courage to go to my local representatives and do what you did. Amazing.
Well, look what you're doing. But you're doing it. You're interviewing people.
Yeah.
And you're treating them with kindness. And who can ask for that? Who can ask for anything more? Just on.
I know Tom DeLonge was like pushing the bad ET thing, and I didn't really like that. He's the main like guitarist of Blink-182.
I know who he is.
And yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this, is just to give an alternative to what's out there. But Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on. I understand there's only like a certain amount of info we can get out with one interview. So I really like those, those listening in, if they do get the chance to purchase a book and read the rest, because you do have a lot of other interesting stories that we didn't get into today. But thank you so much for coming on. It's been way loads of fun.
It has. One last thing, in case they're interested, Jan, if you just type in Amazon and just go quantum windows, it should come up. But my name is Rebecca Renfroe on the book. It's Rebecca Renfroe-Borneman. That's my married name. And if you like music, you just type in my name and type "The Universe is Calling You."
YouTube.
And that's on YouTube. And I'm so grateful. I want to put in a good word to the people who helped me write. And that's Kathy Martin. And she is famous for all of her work and what she's done. And James Earl Jones passed recently, who did the movie of her aunt's life. And also to the Colonel, who's passed, who did the foreword for my book. And all of the people involved who have encouraged me along the way, including my husband, and all of those in ufology, and all of those who have prayed for me, and for you taking the time to interview me. And I want to send out a blessing to each person who's listening, that they'll be uplifted and find their way on this planet.
Well, that's lovely. Well, thank you again. And to those watching today's interview, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time. So take care, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.